Would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. You know, when we look at everything going on right now, when we look around the world, we look here at home, we look at all the war zones going on. And, you know, we've been saying it for a while. Many alternative media outlets have been saying for a while that we are in a world war. It's just not the same type of a world war. After the Cold War, even though we've had the battles and, you know, you can look at Vietnam, you can look at, you know, Iraq, Afghanistan. We've also seen a psychological war go on. And it goes on foreign and domestic with your own government. And there's always these agendas out there. And what we're seeing now, though, is globally there's starting to be awakening, and especially I think in a lot of the what we call the Western countries. Right now we have, you know, the Brexit going on, where we're going to see if Britain decides to leave the EU, which I hope they do. And it's weird to say that, because that's a more of a kind of nationalist type thinking. And even though I am a libertarian, I do believe in that. I'm seeing what's going on. And I'm also seeing it here, you know, with Trump. Now, we do have a third-party candidate that's doing very well, Gary Johnson. Just to point that out, because, well, the mainstream's not. Even though CNN is going to have a, I believe, some type of town hall going on, they're still not really looking at Gary as a, oh, he might be president. But what we've seen is a lot of people really looking at Gary Johnson and going, hey, you know, maybe this is a chance. But when we look at the two candidates, we have a person that's up there in a way as a nationalist, and that's Donald Trump. He's playing the nationalist card. Whether he is or not, or you believe he is or not, that's kind of the card that's been played for him. And then you have Hillary, which we kind of already relate to as a globalist, and we're seeing that where nationalists and globalists are in a struggle right now, and that's because what the globalists are doing is disrupting cultures in a lot of Western countries, European, here in America, and that's part of their goal. That's kind of been omitted in different ways, but when you look at exactly what's happening globally, is there is finally that pushback. But a problem that's going to arise from that, I see, is we are going to, in a way to push back against the globalism, we will ignore civil liberties once again, which if the other side gets back in power, is not going to be good for you. So we're having that problem. But, I think we're going to have to see what even happens with maybe Gary Johnson, to see if maybe he comes out as, people are just fed up with both sides, and, maybe he actually comes close at least. But we'll see what happens. Again, how much can a president actually do? Well, that matters how far they're willing to go. And then, if there's someone that uses executive order, well, they're not really kind of going along with the Constitution in that way. Therefore, blackmail and all that can play a part in it. But I do want to get on to a Ron Paul Liberty report. And this one is over who I believe to be a globalist. But the Clinton Foundation hack, amazing revelations. Again, that's a Ron Paul Liberty report.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. We have a subject today dealing with the Clintons.
Oh, no.
And we're going to look at and solve all the problems and all the mysteries of all the emails and the foundation, and so everybody knows what's going on. I wished I did understand it, but we're seeing and getting more information. Of course, the big news in the last day or two has been that this Romanian hacker has released the fact that he was able to hack into the Clinton Foundation report. And it's rather startling. We already know that, ethics is a marginal quality for Hillary. She's been in serious trouble, with the FBI and the government on how she handled her emails. And some emails just disappeared. Sometimes people get into trouble when they erase evidence. But so far, she doesn't seem to be bothered too much. And somebody mentioned, she lost 33,000 emails, and we can't see them, and they're not available. But somebody said, yeah, but all the foreign governments have hold of these things, too. But now this revelation by a hacker, Gussifer, the number 2, has revealed, and they were able to hack in here and give us some startling information on what's going on. And it looks like it was well organized, and they just figured they could get away with it. It's a Bill Clinton Foundation, but it looks like it was designed to perpetuate the Clinton dynasty, to help Hillary and also help her during the time she was, Secretary of State. But there were just a few surprises in there. The extensiveness was what surprised me, and all the individuals who felt compelled to send Bill Clinton money in his foundation to do good around the world.
What's interesting about it, as much as the content, which is fascinating, but is the fact that the mainstream media thus far has kept it at arm's length distance. You know, we talked just the other day about these 51 State Department employees who signed this little letter, and that was front page news, New York Times. But this, which appears to at least be massive foreign influence while Clinton was Secretary of State, it's hardly being mentioned in the mainstream outlets. Maybe it's yet to break. Maybe we're ahead of the curve, but it really hasn't. But if you think of just the magnitude of the foreign money that went into this Clinton Foundation from foreign governments, according to a 42-page summary, the foundation itself put out about its potential political vulnerabilities. One of the things they point out to Saudi Arabia, Norway, and other foreign governments, over $46 million donated to them. They must be very charity-minded to give.
Not that it matters much, but I wonder if there are any rules. I guess there's no rules against foreign governments donating to private foundations in this country. It seems like with all the regulations we have that somebody might have said, you know, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
But
you know, Zero Hedge printed some of the Guccifer's hacks, and there are the Clinton Foundation's own views of its own vulnerabilities. And you just look at some of these at random, and every time you look at it, your jaw drops. An embattled businessman with ties to Bahrain's state-owned aluminum company gave between $1 and $5 million to the Clinton Foundation. The CEO of an Amsterdam-based energy company donated at least $1 million to the Clinton Foundation, and later announced at the 2009 GCI meeting a $5 billion project to build an environmentally friendly power station in India and China.
You know, the other day we mentioned the amount of money this country still donates, and I believe the figure is accurate. Our people do donate a lot of money, like $380 billion. But I wonder if this qualifies for donating to a just cause and helping the poor. For some reason, I suspect there's a little bit more shenanigans going on here, and it just possibly could be buying influence.
Yeah, and just a couple of other ones. The Wall Street Journal tied foreign government donors to the Clinton Foundation's endowment fundraising under Secretary Clinton. So these things were happening while she was Secretary of State. The foundation was raising enormous amounts of money from foreign governments, government-tied business people. You know, this makes Watergate look like a walk in the park, yet, again, the media is so far not jumping all over it.
And there's a little bit of stonewalling goes because evidently people were aware of these things going on. Even 10 years ago, they said that people have been requesting and trying to get the donors and have a little bit of transparency here. So it took 10 years, but it's very incomplete. They said that it doesn't tell you exactly who they are and their addresses, their telephone numbers, and this sort of thing. But there's more information now than before, but it's still not true revelation on who may have been influencing Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State and then setting her up. I think that was part of it. But part of it was laying this plan for be able to donate to a tax-exempt foundation to Bill Clinton, which then can be used to promote her political career. And of course, we have the FBI, and the FBI is there's some good people there, but we have the FBI and the Department of Justice. We have to be dependent on them. They'll bring justice to the world, so I imagine they'll soon reveal this. And there are some of our friends, including Judge Napolitano. He's rather clear on what he thinks she has done, something very serious, and believing it qualifies for a prosecution. But right now, I'm not that optimistic about our Department of Justice. I'm not going to hold my breath for that to happen.
Well, the other thing that's interesting, if you look at the mess that is U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, or just look at the mess that is the Middle East, you have to start wondering if you can put two and two together. Here's Saudi Arabia giving the Clinton Foundation millions and millions of dollars, and then here's Secretary of State Hillary Clinton following the Saudi line on, for example, the overthrow of the Assad government in Syria. Here's the U.S. State Department following the line that's desired by the Saudi government. Is there a tie? It certainly looks like there could be a case made for that.
Well, you know, the fact that the Saudis are a close ally of ours has always been a major question, but the media generally has ignored this. And I think it does persist. You know, all the way back to 9/11, or even before that, our alliance with them was very questionable. But especially since 9/11 and with these 28 pages of the Senate report that has been denied to the American people to see. So this is even more connection with our government and how these things operate. I cannot see any good coming from it. But what about this idea that if hacking occurs and you accuse somebody of hacking, that under international law or one of our agreements, it could be an act of war?
Yeah, this is actually something that, NATO has been working on this for a number of years. They've been trying to get everyone to agree to it. Finally, on June 14th, just a few days ago, NATO announced that it would make cyber operations part of its domain. So along with air, sea, and land, cyber is another issue. So what it means is if a NATO member country is hacked, it's computer hacked, the country that did it, the country that's a victim can invoke Article 5, which obligates all NATO members to attack the country that hacked that country's computers.
Okay, I have a question, though. Public record was shown it, well, these are Russians. The Russians are doing it. But it turns out it's probably the Romanians that are doing it. Could they ever make a mistake? Could governments make a mistake like that and start a war with the wrong people?
You can imagine. Oops, World War III starts. Oh, sorry, it was the Romanians.
Yeah, you hacked our computers, so what are we going to do about it?
And will we bomb Romania if it turns out it was a Romanian hacker who did it? You know.
I guess that we still don't know the damage done for her private server. That's a little bit separate from the foundation, because that's been out pretty much in the open. There's been a lot of talk about it and whether or not there'll be prosecution. But I don't imagine we will probably ever know, exactly the damage done by this. But obviously, it was feasible. If somebody out there can get into and find out what happens at the foundation, they surely, with the lack of security with Hillary's private server, it probably wasn't very hard for people to get that. And maybe there's a lot of stuff still floating out in the hands of people that they can use at a later date. Maybe the Chinese have this, Russians have it, who knows who has all this information.
Well, you've been critical of almost all the candidates throughout this entire election season, so you certainly can't be accused of just picking on Hillary. But this chapter between the homebrew private server in her bathroom and what we've been revealed with the foundation hack, it shows either startling incompetence or a startling level of corruption on the Clinton side, and it makes you wonder how you can continue in a campaign with these revelations.
My take on that would be that she's blindly believing it is very necessary to protect what she does from the people and not have any records kept. So it was her personal way of having personal privacy to do this, and it turns out it was probably very stupid the way she did it. But I think some people just think they're above the law, and when you can get away with it, and they have notoriously gotten away, the Clinton. But a lot of politicians going, if you're on the right side of the Department of Justice, you can get away with things. If you're on the wrong side, sometimes they gang up on you.
What does this say sort of in a larger moral context about our society? Can you make any conclusions?
Yeah, cautiously, I would say that this is another sign that there's something desperately wrong with our society. I frequently, when I talk about economics and foreign policy, and try to get people to change policy, and ideas have consequences. But then I keep thinking that nothing really happens unless there's a moral foundation. I think the founders recognize this too. This system doesn't work unless you have a moral people. And I think there's evidence that we have a less moral people today than ever before. And it's been said by some immigrants that have come legitimately from communist countries and saying that they see a similarity of a deterioration of society. Everything becomes corrupt. People resort to alcohol, and then there's aggressiveness in competition. The political parties fight. It's never a serious discussion on what should the role of government be, and is it a good idea to maximize liberty for individuals, it becomes very competitive. But if people are immoral, they use the government for getting the stuff that they want, and then they get the power. And I think that that's pretty close to where we are. I mean, we still have a lot of good people in the country, and we have people who object to this. But right now, when you look at it, when you look at our educational system and our political system and our banking system and what our government does to it, and then also how the people are able to use it. I mean, the corruption that is involved. And then when we have a crisis, there's the bailouts and more corruption. Corruption probably causes these problems, then there's more corruption. So the people who are trying to be honest, law-abiding citizens and raise children in a moral way, they sort of get lost in the mix. And I think, unfortunately, I think we're approaching that.
I always remember what our friend Jeff Dice, now of the Mises Institute, told me one time. He said, a truly successful libertarian society would, in his view, have to be a more moral society rather than a more libertine society for the whole libertarian idea to work.
Yeah, and I think that's where we come up short. And we can talk about policy, we can talk about Keynesianism and Austrian economics, we can talk about non-interventionism, and I think we should. I mean, I believe in it and promote it, hoping that it has an influence. But I think ultimately the people's attitudes and the people's morality pretty darn important, and that's not a government function. The government can't decide, well, we're going to have better families, and this is how we're going to describe a family life, and this is what these personal moral values are supposed to be, because that's out of the realm of government. So there's a role for all of us to play in both developing economic ideas, foreign policy ideas, but also all of us are involved in developing and trying to promote and encourage people to follow personal moral values. And most of us have some relationship to family in one way or the other, and we certainly should assume that responsibility to try to bring up children and influence the people in a moral way and an ethical way, so that the government isn't based on theft and robbery and deceit and corruption. And unfortunately, I think we're slipping that way. But that doesn't mean that just because it doesn't look so good that we should give up on it. I think we just have to recognize how difficult the job is. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube, RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Check them out, subscribe. Now, we see through a lot of the globalist and the agenda that's being pushed, like in the EU, the EU Parliament can vote on something, but it's always, most of the time overruled, or, it's still dictated through a secret group of people, and the Parliament just kind of gets overruled. And then the EU countries are basically forced to implement these or be fined. I think the only reason we don't have some type of North American Union is because we're one of the only countries that is very, gun friendly compared to a lot of other countries. And I think that's part of why they're pushing it at the end of Obama's presidency. And I think that if we go down that path, we are in for it. But, Trump's playing the nationalist card, but then he's also going to play the nationalist card where we still have to have that boogeyman. And so there will be laws enacted like, we should at least put a temporary hold on people, maybe on a no-fly list or, some type of watch list. then you have so much time to prove or disprove, it's not a path that we need to go down. This is not a path we should go down or should even want to go down. Um, and we know we have some of those out there that are just completely brainwashed. They've been raised a certain way. They have embedded, and they've never been around guns. And then there's a few out there that are curious. You know, there's a lot of stories out there right now about um, the you know gay rights and the LG. I don't even know the correct acronym for it, but they are now showing up and participating in shooting lessons and getting their permits. And there's even one, I believe, in Texas, a gun um, training course that they have offered free to that community. That way they can be empowered and emboldened and be licensed to protect themselves. So we have some good things going on. We have some bad things going on, but we are still really headed in maybe the negative direction, should we say. Um, and I think that if we can, work with, like the 10th Amendment, we work locally, we empower our sheriffs, we empower our citizens, um, and we prevent a overreach of our civil liberties. I think that um, we have a chance at maybe a slow but positive return to some type of um, understanding of rights and not allow them to be given up. Because whether people want to admit it or not, um, gun rights protect the anti-gunners. Their choice to not take advantage of that is a choice that they make. But it's still their right. And what if all of a sudden they're being stalked and they don't feel safe? They can't afford a bodyguard, but maybe they could afford a small pistol. Um, you know, there are plenty of stories out there about people that were anti-gun that became pro-gun. And then there were people, I'm sure that might have even been pro-gun and said, no, I'm not for that. But I don't think that you have too many of those that go, oh, they shouldn't even exist. It's usually more like, it's just not for me. I do want to get into this Brexit some more. I do have some articles. I think I want to get to this clip first and get through this. Maybe. Come on. Sorry, guys. get this to pop up here. Okay, there, let's go. I had to reload the player here. I want to play this because it kind of covers the whole Trump firing the campaign manager and Brexit fears. This is out of AMTV, Christopher Green. Here we go. Maybe. Not sure what's going on. There it goes.
TV, alternative media television. Of course, it is Tuesday, June 21st, 2016. Donald Trump fires his campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, and another guy steps down in New York, showing internal rifts and signs of instability with inside Donald Trump's political operation. Now, prior to this, in fact, Donald Trump was in Phoenix here over the weekend. I've thought that Donald Trump's campaign has even gotten stronger than it was before. But this actually is a warning sign, I have to admit. And again, this is from a guy who predicted, when nobody believed me, that Donald Trump would win the GOP nomination, which he essentially has, at least in theory up until this point, unless they try to steal it from him, but will lose the general election in 2016. Not something I'm happy about. And of course, as I've stated pretty much repeatedly, I hope that I'm wrong. If I wake up in November and Donald Trump actually wins, I'm going to be pleasantly surprised and I'm going to be thrilled. And I'll be the first to admit that I didn't see it coming. But I don't think we have a political system in the United States. That's the point. I think that the two-party system is rigged. I think, just like Donald Trump says, it's all bullshit, right and left. It's a dog and pony show. It's a movie. It's mass entertainment. It's total and utter propaganda. But again, this shows internal rifts in the middle of Donald Trump's political campaign. This really isn't good news because I don't know why you would shake up something that's been working. I mean, even if there's internal politics and egos at play, could be Donald Trump's ego, could be Lewandowski's, who knows, maybe he's a bad apple, who really knows? Still, why shake up something that's been working in droves? It's not a good sign. And Donald Trump has an uphill battle facing off Hillary Clinton in this liberal, leftist, radical supported media, companies like CNN that fully endorse Hillary Rodham Clinton and fully reject Donald Trump. You know, I don't even believe that Fox News entirely supports Donald Trump. Again, the two-party system is an illusion. It is essentially one party, and the whole thing is rigged. It's a movie, kind of like Hunger Games or something like that, or a TV show like American Idol. It's honestly been quite boring. From somebody who can intellectualize and actually see the world for what it is, especially this political dog and pony show, it's been quite boring. There's been nothing about this election cycle over the past few weeks that's caught my interest at all outside of the recent shakeup within Donald Trump's campaign. It's been quite boring. It's been quite predictable until this recent event. Also, George Soros warning of a Black Friday on Brexit fears as soon as this Friday. Yeah, that's right. He's warning of massive collapse as soon as this week. Of course, the UK is voting on whether or not it should leave the defunct, crippled, bankrupt, failed experiment that makes up the Eurozone. It's barely been in operation for, less than 20 years or something like that, in that ballpark. Says there could be a total and utter meltdown and collapse in a potential Black Friday this Friday as a result. He said that each United Kingdom household could be affected somewhere in the ballpark of $6,000 to $9,000 in gross income per year, and that the currency itself could collapse anywhere from, I think he said, 20 to 30%. Now, this is from a guy, by the way, who shorted aggressively the pound during the last major UK financial crisis and became a billionaire. Now, I wouldn't trust George Soros at all. In fact, he's probably, I would bet he's on the other side of this trade, that this is just a war of words to help his positioning in whatever derivative investments that he's currently involved in, whether or not it's on the long side or the short side. But, you know, the proof is in the pudding here, folks. At some point, there's going to be a major collapse. This cannot continue infinitum, into infinity. We are 7 to 8 years in the business cycle now of this artificial recovery stimulated by 0% interest rates and the whore at the Federal Reserve that makes up Janet Yellen. And it can't continue forever. We know, for example, this is just math, that business cycles typically last roughly 8 years or so. Maybe they go on 9 years. We are in the 7th to 8th inning now, 8th year in this artificial bullshit recovery. You know, there will be consequences. Just like we had the roaring 20s, and it resulted in the Great Depression and the collapse in stock market crisis of 1929, which took roughly several decades for us to break even again. And it took a world war, World War II. We're positioned for the same thing again. Now, who knows? In this technologically advanced world, parabolic moves in artificial intelligence and the algorithm and big tech companies, who knows? Maybe Ray Kurzweil is right, the transhumanist, that it'll just be parabolic growth and a shift into infinity, and there will never be a reversion to the mean again. We'll just have nanobots living out, you know, through our body. We'll chip all of our kids, take the mark of the beast, take the number 666, and just, you know, ingest these, you know, robotic materials into our bodies so that we're no longer human, and that we create our own living dystopic hell and live in the digital ghettos that make up Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Isn't that great? That sounds amazing, doesn't it? Well, I actually believe that there are consequences, that there will be a catastrophe, that there will be a come to Jesus moment, literally, not just figuratively, but literally. I believe that to be the case. And I think it's the equivalent of being on the edge of a freaking cliff. Nothing's changed since 2008 and 2009. They've only doubled down and compounded our problems from where we were before, with massive debt, with an inverted pyramid scheme that makes up, you know, baby boomers trying to collect the things that they've rightfully earned, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all these things, but that can't be paid for by a millennial generation that essentially has no wealth and is a renter society. Notice how we're a leasehold society now, whether or not it's Uber or it's Airbnb or it's with cars. I mean, the millennial generation, I'm not saying this is a bad thing necessarily, but they don't value ownership like the traditional baby boomers did. You know, buy a house, hold it for 30 years, pay it off, mortgage yourself to the balls, and hope everything's going to be all right, so that there can be a collapse in 2008 and you can be stolen from and half of your net worth will liquidate overnight. You see, the millennials have learned their lesson. They're like, that's bullshit. We're not going to do that. We're going to live our lives now. We would rather lease. We would rather Airbnb it or home away it or rent. And a lot of the times they're renting because they can't afford it because prices are sky high due to the artificial demand created by the bullshit system that makes up Federal Reserve policy and printing money into thin air with 0 to negative interest rates. So we have this inversion of the whole model that worked for the last 50 years, the corporate model, which no longer exists. We now live in a freelance society. We live in a society of tech monopolies. That's exactly what they are. Don't be mistaken about that. Google, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, all these companies, Amazon, they are monopolies. But no one seems to care. You know, didn't they try to break up Microsoft at one point when it had too much power and clout? There's not even a single lawsuit that's really been, at least in the mainstream news that I'm familiar with, litigating any of these companies for holding an absolute monopoly on the global population, not just here in the United States of America, but globally. You know, it's ridiculous. It's amazing that we've given up all this control and power to essentially robots, to the algorithm, to this, what Ray Kurzweil says, one of the, you know, worker bees of Google, these high-powered executives that has like 4 blood transfusions a week and thinks he's going to live to get forever as a transhumanist, says that basically that we're going to reach a singularity and that all of human consciousness will be exceeded by the AI, essentially computers. You know, I personally find this worrisome. I agree with people like Elon Musk, founder of Tesla, SpaceX, and Solar City, that, you know, I don't know if the people of this planet can survive another decade, if not, you know, 100 years or more. It's one of the reasons why he's aggressively expanding into space, into places like Mars, because he literally thinks we need to get off the planet. You know, Stephen Hawking echoes this with his latest, you know, artificial intelligence comment, saying it's, you know, something along the lines, it's more dangerous than nuclear weapons. I agree. I actually think it is. Take it from a guy who started a YouTube channel 7 years ago, who was laughed at, who now gets calls repeatedly, literally day and night, people wanting me to consult them on how to monetize the internet. They now think I'm a genius. They thought I was an idiot before, but now I'm a freaking genius. This is how fast this technological shift is snowballing, how fast the Eurozone is collapsing. Now, again, I actually think that the UK stays. I think there's a push to stay. We saw this even with the murder of an MP, which looked like a conspiracy to me, what was it, a week ago, which actually helped shift the weight to a stay vote versus a, you know, let's get out of the Eurozone. I actually think the UK stays. I think George Soros is pandering to the mainstream media. I think he's on the opposite side of the trade, even though he's fear-mongering. Ultimately, the New World Order paradigm wants further integration of this system that creates this new structure. They want more and more power. They want to break up sovereignty of nations, destroy countries and their borders. It's exactly why there's been this, you know, enormous debate, not just here in the United States, but also Europe. It's exactly why Barack Obama has engineered covertly and overtly through CIA intelligence operations in the Middle East so that they can destabilize a region so that more immigrants pour over into places like Europe and the United States, which also, by the way, and this was intentional of the Obama administration, promotes jihadi terrorism because it gives them reason to take away the guns, to execute his gun control narrative and objective, which has been part of his campaign from day one, and push an even greater 1984 dystopic Orwellian society that makes up a lack of control, lack of freedom, lack of liberty in the United States and abroad. Again, they want to integrate all of us. They want to merge us with the technology. We become the peasants, they become the elites. I would argue that these tech giants and these tech figures have already began to merge with the AI. They're already becoming the Borg. And the elites and the lower classes, the middle classes being utterly eradicated, is just going like this. And we're becoming a society where you just don't have money. You have either massive amounts of wealth, like Bill Gates, tremendous amounts of money. Bill Gates makes $20 million a day, by the way, a freaking day. That's how wealthy he is. And then you have everybody else. It's exactly why we've been socialized. They're talking about mandatory income thresholds in the United States and other countries around the world where they had a vote in Switzerland, for example, because they've got to give the peasant something. They've got to throw a couple breadcrumbs as they monopolize the space, which is exactly what we have today, tech monopolies. So do not be mistaken. This whole election is bullshit. It's a lie, it's a facade, and it's an illusion. It's why I'm disinterested by it. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. I mean, are these really the best two candidates we have? I mean, really, honestly, it's a joke. There's much better Americans out there than what's currently presented to us that could represent the United States of America, especially when we look at Hillary Clinton. And again, I favor Donald Trump. I like what Donald Trump's doing, but he will only win if the elites want him to. Your vote doesn't count. It doesn't matter. The only thing that counts are these tech giants that control everything right now, that also rig and control Washington, D.C., politics, and banking today. Make no mistake about it. You're not in control. They are. This is what the global agenda is. This is what people like me have been warning about for years now. And it's coming full-blown into fruition like the AIDS virus. It's what we live today. And it's incredibly dangerous, and there will be severe consequences in the not-too-distant future. That's something George Soros is right about. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere, make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.
Christopher Green, AMTV. Check him out on YouTube. Subscribe. Now, I'm looking at excuse me. what's going on. Like he said, you know, Donald Trump will win only if the elites want him to win. I'm looking at the big picture, and we've been talking about the economy lately. We've seen Bitcoin and gold to start going up, and projections are showing that they will more than likely go up more. You see the gun control agenda. They're at risk of Britain being able to exit the EU. Of course, did we not just see that happen in Greece, where there was a vote, referendum, people want to leave the EU, but they stayed still? Will they actually let Britain leave? I think if the vote does go and they're not able to manipulate it enough, which I'm sure they would try. I think they would have to. And then we also have, I had an article here. Let me find it. Shouldn't take long. Shouldn't. Okay, here we are. We have article here out of express.co.uk. Brexit now. Marine Le Pen promises France their own referendum from decaying EU. And it says here the National Front Party leader said Thursday historic EU referendum was a clear indication that the 28-nation bloc was decaying, as she vowed to give her own countrymen the choice should she be elected to the police palace. She said, I would vote for Brexit even if I think that France has 1,000 more reasons to leave than the UK. Because we have the Euro and Schengen. Whatever the result, it shows the EU is decaying, that there are cracks everywhere. Her vows likely to heighten fears a Brexit could lead to the entire breakup of Europe. Ms. Le Pen has previously praised David Cameron for pledging to hold a referendum on EU membership and forcing the European Commission to cede to demands of Britain. The Anti-Immigration Party has vowed to hold a vote just 6 months after it wins power during the presidential elections next year. Ms. Le Pen said that the part would force the bloc to hand border control, budgetary, legislative, and monetary sovereignty back to France. This week, she said the totalitarian bloc were to blame for rising high unemployment, low growth, and uncontrolled immigration. She added, so let's get around a table and create a Europe of the nations. The far-right leader said she'd be twice as popular as current French President Francois Hollande. According to a latest poll, the result represents a damning verdict for Hollande's 4-year socialist experiment, which has been marred by resigning unemployment and stalling economy, France will elect its next president in a two-round election in April and May next year, with only the two top candidates progressing to the all-important runoff in the second round. Ms. Le Pen, who has been compared to Donald Trump and Nigel Farage, has seen a massive surge in her poll numbers, which could put her on course for a place in the second round and possibly an against all odds victory. And I brought up how all these cracks have been showing up, and when we were looking at Greece, when we were looking at the immigration issues in Europe, a lot of this is part of a globalist thing that the dictators of the EU have been directing these things to happen in each nation. And if the nation doesn't participate, then they get, beat up for it, basically, by the EU. And the thing is, they're having to claim their sovereignty right now. Well, we kind of have that problem with the, UN, United Nations, and NATO, and how they work together to not really to do it, but they are the authority that you have our military and our president right now claiming, well, this is what we agreed to over here. We should have talked to you, Congress, about it, but they're our authority to do it. And like, no. And really, in a way, you look at what's going on, you're like, this is basically like treason in a way, isn't it? Well, no, because they rewrite regulations. They basically change the definitions and the meanings of things. And that was the one thing about gay marriage. And it was something to upset the right. It was to anger people. And they basically changed the definition. Therefore, as long as they can make that, push to change it, and they go, okay, now we can't look at marriage as a religiously defined word. We have to make it a socially defined word. And it's really smoke and mirrors. So then they look at the Second Amendment, and we'll just change the rules of the English language. We'll pretend that the founding fathers weren't that smart, and they just kind of stuck commas in there, not really knowing what they meant. Even though the words are really eloquent, they didn't know what a comma meant. So that comma doesn't really separate militia from the individual, even though the militia is all the individuals. Me, you, your brother, your sister, your aunt, uncle. It's a voluntary association of each other to step up and be the defenders and put your lives on the line. They change, redefine, and manipulate. They teach it in the schools. So a lot of these younger people, they have no definition of what these words, phrases truly meant in their writings, because they have a redefined definition, not of what things meant, but of what people believe they should have meant or should have said. Or they're just rewriting it for our current times because it was written, who was it? Greta on Fox News, I think it was. Someone, don't quote me on that. It might not have been her. If it wasn't her, I apologize. But someone said that the Second Amendment was written before firearms existed, something to that extent. And yeah. Your right to bear what? Arms? Did that mean you could go sleeveless then? Was that what that meant? I'm not sure what we fought the revolution with. People go, oh, they didn't have a semi-automatic gun back then. Actually, they had been working on equivalents. They might have not been the best, but I've seen some unique firearms from that era. You'd probably be amazed. Okay. Now, right now, this coming out of Reason.com. It's coming out of a lot of places all over the news. Democrats sit in for a secret list and maybe even a police state. Democrats are holding a sit in on the floor of the House demanding action on gun control. The time for silence and patience is long gone, said Representative John Lewis, Democrat from Georgia, a former civil rights leader who taken the lead in the sit-in. The American people are demanding action. Do we have the courage? Do we have the raw courage to make at least a down payment on ending gun violence in America? Don't say the American people. Don't. No, a small percentage. And a lot of these polls have been proven to be very one-sided, and there are other polls, independent polls at that have proven that. But it says here, have the courage, at least a down payment on ending gun violence in America. Details are scarce. Vox.com reports that House Democrats would like to force a vote the way Senate Democrats did through a filibuster. The Senate voted on 4 gun bills on Monday night, with all 4 failing. The most egregious wanted to deny the right to bear arms for anyone who is put on the federal government's terror watch list. A list the federal government can put any American on without even the pretext of due process. But there do not appear to be any bills similar to the ones in the Senate that have actually been submitted to the House. I called the D.C. office of Representative Lewis to ask which legislation the sit-in was intended, but was told there was no specific legislation, but rather a push to get some kind of vote. After asking a follow-up, the person who picked up the phone told me he did not speak for the office and gave me contact information for Lewis's communication director, who has not responded. It is not surprising that there is no specific gun bill House Democrats have in mind. Despite their rhetoric, gun control has not been high on their legislative agenda and appear to be simply exploiting emotions surrounding the Orlando shooting. An exercise I noted was dangerous for the way it can be used to limit civil liberties, restrict immigration, and even expand America's military interventions abroad. Sit-ins were used in the 1950s and 1960s to protect segregation. Activists would sit in places they weren't welcome in order to demand equal treatment. Today, Lewis and other Democrats are sitting in a chamber that they are part of and that they controlled not so long ago. The Democrats controlled both houses of Congress and the presidency from 2009 to 2010, but did not pass any gun control legislation then. The 4 bills considered by the Senate all violated civil liberties of Americans to one degree or another. Democrats' hobby horse in the gun debate this time around is demanding that people on the terror watch list, which could contain more than 1 million names, be stripped of their constitutional right to bear arms, a basic violation of due process. Yet Lewis manages to use the language of injustice, tweeting that there were Democrats were doing was speaking out against injustice. It's as good an opportunity to remind Lewis and others who are leveraging their connections to civil rights movements from the 1960s to the present day to push their partisan agenda that gun control has an indisputably racist history, crazy N-word, with guns help federal Jim Crow laws, while fear of guns in the hands of black people drove gun control laws in the 1960s. Even today, while mass shootings are convenient, high-profile events on which to pin a gun control push, gun control advocates often cite inner-city violence as a reason to act on gun control. Many cities with significant African-American populations like Chicago and New York have among the strictest gun control laws in the country. Anti-gun advocates point to island nations like Australia and the United Kingdom, or largely ethnically homogeneous small countries in Europe, as examples of gun control working, instead of countries like Brazil, which are closer in population, demographics, and history to the U.S. Voters in Brazil rejected a law to ban guns, understanding it was just another way to exacerbate the income inequality gap. Cops in Brazil and even Uruguay have been suspected of selling weapons to getting strict gun control laws in that country and elsewhere in the Americas have been ineffective in lowering gun violence. Donald Trump is called a racist for insisting he's going to build a wall on the border, but given the ability of firearms in the Americas, anything approaching effective gun control measures would require something like a huge wall to stem the flow of traffic of weapons that become highly controlled in the U.S. Similarly, the results anti-gun advocates demand would require a ramping up of enforcement in inner cities where a disproportionate amount of gun violence occurs by the very same cops the anti-gun left would just a few short months ago insisted it understood were engaged in systematic brutality of marginalized communities. Today, John Lewis and his colleagues are sitting in on the House floor to demand just that, cloaking themselves in emotional fervor and exploiting a culture of fear not that far from what white supremacists in the 1960s did when they demanded more laws to control African Americans and deny them their rights. So, go check that article out at reason.com. And really, these people really should just be ashamed of themselves. They really should be. It's a pathetic push to play off of emotions to get a agenda, and yeah, kind of sick people. Just saying. Why I'm here at reason.com. Representative Thomas Massey irked that GOP-dominated House Rules Committee killed amendments to defund D.C. gun laws. Despite today's sit-in by Democrats in the House of Representatives advocating some action to further restrict Americans' Second Amendment rights today, Representative Tom Massey says that he very much doubts any new anti-gun action will issue from a Congress with both houses controlled by Republicans. But this week's move worried about pro-gun action that House Speaker Paul Ryan and his leadership team seems reluctant to get to the floor, despite an initial promise on continuing an open process for allowing amendments to come to the floor for a vote. Ryan changed his tune and now has a structured process whereby the Rules Committee can prevent amendments from making the floor. Massey complained about this charge to Huffington Post earlier this month. Massey this week saw the Rules Committee choke two of his proposed amendments to the Financial Services and General Government Appropriations Act intended to prevent the District of Columbia from damaging its citizens' Second Amendment rights. Massey is pretty sure that's just because the leadership thinks it can't help and only hurt certain possibly vulnerable Republican House seats in November to put its members on record on the matter. The amendments would have defunded D.C. efforts to enforce gun-free zones and its permit requirements for concealed carry in the district. As of this morning, Massey had not been told there was any preliminary errors in the way they were crafted. He has reason to believe they just got smacked down because the Rules Committee, which is 9-4 Republican, didn't want to make the House think about them. Massey 2 years ago offered an amendment that was far more sweeping to defund all of DC's gun control, every single law, and it got to the floor under an open rule. It passed overwhelmingly 241 to 181, although the bill it was attached to was eventually abandoned. In total, Massey can't be sure, but he thinks that the amendment passing might have prodded a U.S. District Court to finally act later this same month on overturning DC's total ban on public carry of weapons, a case that had been languishing mysteriously for years. A disappointed Massey worries that the legislative agenda in the House is driven by a desire to protect maybe half a dozen members in swing seats who are incidentally the least conservative members of the Republican conference. While some think post-Orlando is a bad time to openly debate measures like Massey's, he believes the opposite. The Senate got their votes, and no one wants to hurt over there. This would be a great opportunity to talk about how background checks don't work and how gun-free zones make us less safe. We should be having such votes. Massey regrets that he sees leadership believing it's better if we are not on record on certain issues. He admits many of his colleagues might actually prefer such a paternalistic system that protects them from votes on issues people care deeply about. He doesn't think even greater majorities for the GOP would make Ryan back down on killing open rules for amendments. Once someone grabs power, rarely do they let go of it. This was an autocratic power grab. Even former Speaker John Boehner didn't succumb to or partake in it. It irks Massey to see Republicans being timid about pursuing things like his amendments, since we are sometimes too timid, and the Democrats are never timid. And, you know, I brought this up before. The Democrats never seem to want to back down, but the Republicans tend to always back down. Maybe because the Democrats are just on a faster path to a goal that both sides want. The true establishment, the progressives, whatever you want to call them. The puppets. Okay, give me a second here. Sorry, guys. We'll get this going here. Okay. Now, I think that when we look at where our political system is, and if we can take steps to, first off, you know, keep our sovereignty, to at least keep this. If we lose the illusion that we have choice, it's basically over. So I think that we're looking at an event that we have to, one, keep our sovereignty, and then two, we have to really look at our rights as individuals, and we have to get back towards a constitutional system. I think it's going to be very difficult, but first we have to keep our sovereignty, and that goes down to the sovereignty of the states and the local. Again, I think to protect our rights, we will have to embolden our local liberty and freedom loving people. I think that along with this election, that I think that's really a very, very extremely big focal point. And look at who is out there and push for true constitutional freedom, liberty loving people. You know, and I mean respecting property rights, respecting the First, the Second, the Third, the Fourth, the Fifth Amendments. You know, you can't just skip. So if we do that, I think that we make a positive step, but we also have to see what's going on with Europe. We have to look at what's going on with Asia, with, Russia, with South America. We have to make a monetary policy shift. We have to make, we have to go back to the constitutional values. And I'm a big libertarian. I believe in freedom and liberty, but like I've constantly said this, that I don't want some violent revolution, because to get a positive result out of a bloody and violent revolution is going to be one of the most difficult things, and it probably won't happen. You will probably end up with the dictator after that, or a foreign occupancy. So really think about that. Anybody trying to call for that, they are probably going to lead you down a path that, well, it doesn't leave a positive outlook for your future. But it's up to us to get out there and really be involved locally and create that community. And, they got Pork Fest going on right now in New Hampshire. I was hoping to make it out there this year, and it didn't work out. Wishing all the gentlemen and ladies out there, and hope they're all having a great time, and the message of freedom and liberty and the ideas and the Free State Project are just flourishing out there, because I think that's a major, major step that we need to see emulated across our country and hopefully across the world. If, we can start seeing it across our borders. And, when you look at Brexit, if they get their sovereignty back and we actually see a move that could allow them to, you know, maybe get their rights and their freedoms back. I think there is that possibility, definitely with the influx of forced immigration, and I will continue to say forced immigration, because we have these non-declared wars, and we've helped in one way or another ISIS to become bigger in the name of taking out dictators, and now in Syria with Assad, that what we're looking at is a chance for Britain to maybe get their gun rights back, to maybe, you know, well, if they Brexit, they will have their monetary policy back in their control, their economy back in their control, and I think that we need to get a whole world where we start getting down to local control. And I think it's extremely hard and a long process, and probably wouldn't happen in my lifetime. But, well, yeah, I'm almost positive it won't happen in my lifetime. But I think we could get to that point. But we have to understand the world around us more, and we also have to understand all the implications of what we have to do to get to that place. I got a clip here. Oh, we're cutting it close here, but I'm going to play it from the Mises Media on YouTube. Godfrey Bloom, What Brexit Means.
This week has been consumed by this terrible nightclub shooting in Orlando. But now we turn our attention to another important news event, the upcoming Brexit vote in the UK, which is scheduled for this Thursday, June 23rd. And some polls are suggesting that the Leave campaign holds a 19% lead, perhaps, over the Stay campaign. So here to help us break it down and discuss it all is Godfrey Bloom, the great un-PC former member of the European Parliament, who is infamous or famous among libertarians for often quoting Murray Rothbard on the floor of that not too august legislature. But he'll help us sort out the actual odds of Brexit prevailing, whether other EU or even Eurozone countries will necessarily follow suit if Brexit passes, and what Mises had to say about secession movements generally and self-determination. So stay tuned for a great interview with Godfrey Bloom. Well, first and foremost, Godfrey Bloom, thank you so much for joining us this weekend. I have to get right into this because I'm seeing today that the Remain camp appears to be using this tragedy of this bizarre stabbing of a Labour MP yesterday, or the day before yesterday, to generate support against the Leave folks. Do you think this will work?
Well, I don't know. There's absolutely no connection whatsoever to the Leave campaign. And the eyewitnesses are saying there's absolutely, this guy had nothing whatsoever to do with it. He didn't shout anything, but he is a disturbed individual. He's a madman. And I didn't think, I know politics is a low game. I've been in it for 10 years, or was in it for 10 years. I didn't think it could get any lower. It's a terrible tragedy. This relatively young member of parliament has been murdered by a psychotic, and people are using it for political capital. I don't believe this could have happened in my country 30 years ago. I think this is the sign of a moral decline in Western democracies, which astonishes even me.
I wonder if it says more about The Guardian and that it'll actually backfire on them.
So far, everything that the Remain camp has done has backfired. They've suggested, fascinatingly, that almost everything will happen to us if we leave the European Union. Asteroids crashing into Earth, all our firstborn children will die of the plague. They virtually left nothing unturned. And of course, most Brits are still relatively down-to-earth, common-sense people, and they've just laughed it all off. And of course, we've had 5 weeks of this, and the whole campaign's been turned around. Remain started this campaign ahead, and now it's Vote Leave that's moving ahead. And it's because I don't think you can continue lying to people on the scale that the Remain camp has lied.
Well, you have to understand, in the U.S. are polling information secondhand. We're seeing some polls that sound very favorable towards Leave. We're looking at Ladbrokes. If you had to handicap today Godfrey Bloom, apart from the merits of Brexit,
I would say it was even money. As a betting man, as a horse racing man, and I do occasionally bet on the horses, I would say this was as close to even money as you can get. And if you get better odds than even money, it's not a bad value bet. So that would be my take at the moment. But of course, as you know, and we're not that much different from the United States, a lot can happen in the next 5 days, can't it? A lot of funny things can happen in 5 days. They could be in Leave's favour, or they could be in Remain's favour. We don't just know.
Do you think that the mess that the ECB has created, the sovereign debt crisis in Greece, for example, do you think the fact that the euro and the ECB are both a mess influences Britons on this?
This has been another very interesting 5 weeks. I think possibly the most interesting 5 weeks in politics I've ever spent. And that is, we are now finding the real problem of having had 90 years or so of Keynesianism. We've had 90 years of failed economic theory. Who would have thought that it could have gone quite so long? And now we have a situation, of course, where there are no politicians, none of the media, no journalists actually understand that the reason we are in this appalling mess across the globe, not just Europe, it's across the globe, because of the pursuit of an economic theory that is deeply flawed. And this is one of the problems. I've been at lecture halls, I've been at town halls, I've been trying to explain to people the sort of things that we Austrian economists take for granted. People seem to think that exports are absolutely vital to their well-being. They don't seem to understand that the economy, their economy, the economy that they live in, and the Americans too, are the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the hairdresser, the cab driver. This is the economy. I shouldn't think more in this country, more than 2 people in 100 have anything whatsoever to do with exporting manufactured goods to the European Union. And yet they're being told the sky will fall if we're not member of what is not a free trade organization. This is something some of my friends on Wall Street don't seem to understand, that this European Union is not a free trade area per se, it's a customs union, which puts tariffs on goods coming in from the rest of the world. This isn't about free trade, this is about protectionism, and I don't think this is fully understood, certainly your side of the pond.
No, it's not. Just the way NAFTA was misinterpreted by a lot of supposed capitalists. But when you talk about the sky is falling argument, I wonder if those of us who favor Brexit aren't equally overstating the case. In other words, is this really part of a bigger anti-globalist trend that includes Trump, that includes secessionist movements around the world? Or are we overstating this? I mean, after all, the UK is not leaving Europe. It's just leaving this unholy, or potentially leaving this unholy European Parliament. So are those of us who favor Brexit, are we also overstating the meaning of it?
I think perhaps we probably are. The average Brexiteer is one for a number of reasons. People want to leave the European Union for all sorts of different reasons. There are left-wing, those on the left, the severe left, the rabid socialists are for leave. Because what they want is a UK highly protected nationalised economy, so they're for leave. There are people like me, of course, Austrian complete global free traders who want to leave. We've all got our own reasons. And so, yes, there is that dynamic. And of course, the other thing, and I've said this on many a platform as well, Brexit isn't a silver bullet. Most of the problems that we have are in our own politicians, who are, generally speaking, these days men of very limited education, traditional education, who don't understand the law, they don't understand economics, and they've devoted their life to politics, but they have never really been involved in anything other than politics. So it isn't a question of us being over-regulated by Brussels. We're over-regulated by Westminster. This government, British government, a so-called conservative government, agonizes over too much sugar in drink. They worry about so many tiny aspects of our lives. And of course, Brussels worry about light bulbs, vacuum toasters. The whole economy is so tightly regulated. And what we should be saying is, yes, leaving the European Union is one small step. It's only a small step in the right direction. It's not going to solve all our problems until we have a government in Westminster that doesn't believe that they should regulate everything, not Brussels. We don't want any regulation, please. And on the street, I've been out on the stump campaigning, and ordinary working people have said to me, why can't they leave us alone? If I want to smoke a cigarette with a drink in my pub, and it's all right with the landlord of my pub, let me do it. If I want to drink sugary drinks, that's nobody's business but my own. And this is coming from ordinary people now, and I think they're just saying, leave us alone, stop over-regulating us, do what you're supposed to do, which is defence of the realm, mild administration of the country, cut public spending by at least half, and leave us alone. But of course, as you know, Jeff, nobody knows better, and followers of Austrian economics, that it doesn't matter much whether we leave the European Union or not. It's doomed to failure, and it's doomed to failure through the banking system. The ECB is broke, £3 trillion. The debt, the Germans have £900 billion owed to them by shadow banking. The ECB are buying £80 billion worth of junk bonds every month. They've already bought something like $380 billion. You simply can't go on like this forever. And our own government in the UK, and nobody's talking about this, Jeff. Nobody is talking about this. We are the second most indebted nation in the world after Japan. And I see pundits talking about our debt being 80% of GDP, but they're not taking into consideration unfunded public pensions and public funding initiatives, which have been running for about 10 years. If you take everything into consideration, and of course the businessmen listening to the cast will know that if you leave off under international accounting standards your liability for your pension fund and anything else, it's illegal, it's a criminal offence, and you'd go to prison. And yet the Chancellor of the Exchequer and finance ministers do it all the time. Same in America, of course. So this game's over anyway. Well, it doesn't really matter what we vote on Thursday. The clock is ticking, and the whole thing will collapse in a few years.
Well, we certainly agree with that the game is over with central banks. Do you think that a leave vote might actually hasten a Eurozone nation leaving the Euro?
Yes. It isn't just the British. There's sometimes the spin from the left-wing British press, the Europhile press, and the press on the continent try and make this look like it's a British thing. The European Union is deeply unpopular with the French, for different reasons, admittedly, deeply unpopular with the Germans, and naturally unpopular with the countries in the Pacific Rim. If we leave, we will lead a massive exodus, and there will be demands for referenda all over Northern Europe, certainly, and probably Southern Europe, and out of it will come something which is more practical, more pragmatic, and it will be based, I suspect, on what might have been known as the old Hanseatic League, the northern German states, the northern European states, which are much richer and whose economies function much more in line. And the southern economies can go their own way. And this is the natural progression. But whether or not we do that will depend on Brexit. If the British vote for Brexit, that will follow. The French and the Dutch, and maybe the Germans and the Danes, and possibly the Swedes will follow very quickly.
Well, indulge me in this. You spent a little bit of time in Brussels. You were a member of the European Parliament, and so you've seen some of these folks up close. Do you take a little bit of pleasure in the thought of them losing a bit of turf in the form of the UK? I mean, wouldn't it gall them if Britain actually did this?
Yes, it would, but I'm of a generation now. I'm 66 years old. The Schadenfreude, as it were, is not so sweet on my palate as the fact I've saved my country, or I've helped in some small way save my country, because I was a founder member of the movement back in 1992. So this is a culmination of 25 years hard work and quite a significant amount of my money, because we've had no money. The out campaigns never had any money. So people of my age, of the professional class, have done nothing but dig into their pockets for many years on this. Yes, I wouldn't mind rubbing their noses in it a bit, but that feeling is only going to last perhaps over a few beers in the pub. What we need to do if we do get out is just construct how we're going to move forward from here. And of course, you may or may not know, you probably do, that they had a vote, they had a poll in Switzerland, and 70% of the Swiss said that they hope the British vote for Brexit, they hope they vote out, and they hope we join the the European free trade area with Switzerland to create a whole new idea of free trade, which is not based upon protectionism or tariffs like a customs union, but we can work together for free trade within Europe, but also trade with the rest of the world. And of course, another thing my Wall Street chums don't seem to understand is that we would get our seat back on the WTO. The British are in the top 10 of major economies, global exporting economies. We don't even have a seat on the WTO. I don't know a single American who would put up with what we are having to put up with at the moment. I often find over many years, and of course, as you know, I've spoken in America many, many times and have a lot of American friends, just how woefully ignorant the average American is, even the American businessman, is about how Europe actually works, and indeed European history.
Well, it leads us to a cultural question. If a Texan travels the world and is in the Far East and someone says, "Where are you from?" he probably says Texas. And he might say, "I'm an American, I'm a Yank." When you travel the world, I assume you say, "I'm an Englishman," or perhaps you say you're a Briton. You don't say, "I'm a European."
No, of course you
But
don't.
it seems like these people in Brussels hate national identity. Let's just be frank. Would you agree?
Yes, I do, because the problem that we have here is that the European Union is a secular union. It's an ideal. It's a political ideal, which is almost dealt with a religious fervor. These people are true believers. And when you interrupt, and I've been thrown out of the Parliament on many occasions for actually stating the truth or cross-examining people who I think are lying to the Parliament, you get thrown out. It's not the English Parliament, where that's all part and parcel. The European Parliament, you actually get thrown out. So in the same way that you would be thrown out of a cathedral if you interrupted Mass, that is the reaction that you get. It's one of religious fervor rather than either common sense or pragmatism or realism. All that is not part of the European Union. They don't feel the need to reform, Jeff. It isn't a question of people saying, "Oh, well, it can reform." I've worked out there for 10 years. I was a member of the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee. They do not feel they need to reform. You have regulations being made or amended, for example, on things like hedge funds by a committee that consists of Danish housewives, Romanian trade unionists, or trying to regulate or put a regulatory book together of hedge funds And that's only when somebody stood up, usually me, and explained what a hedge fund is. That you tell them what it is, and within an hour they're regulating it. These people are absolutely stark staring bonkers. And on my website, conservative, she's a conservative, I explain the concept of fractional reserve banking to her. And these people don't even understand the fundamentals. And this is part of the problem, of course, and we both know this. Every member of the Mises Institute knows this. That only Keynesian economics is taught in schools and universities. So they think there is only one type of economics that are available. Nobody's looking for an alternative system of fiat currencies, the reform of central banks, getting rid of central banks, hard currencies, all the things that are second nature to you and me, Jeff, are witchcraft as far as they're concerned.
Well, I can only add that there are many members of the U.S. House of Representatives who sit on committees that have jurisdiction over subjects they know nothing about. So I will leave you, Godfrey Bloom, with one last question. You know, Mises talked about the right of self-determination and secession, if it were practicable, down even to the individual level. He was speaking in the abstract there, in theory. Do Britons see this Brexit vote as something having to do with self-determination, or are they just focused on the economics?
I think it's a mixed bag. When it started, it was just about economics, and the Brexiteers didn't field anybody who could really make the economic case, because the Brexiteers don't have anybody who is really two things. A first edition economist, point one, are not televisual. They're not television friendly. There are only about two people in the entire country who understand economics and understand money, who also know how to perform on TV, and I am one of them. We just didn't do the right things. So what actually happened, the campaign then moved to immigration, which is a big problem here, because you can't have an immigration policy without welfare reform. And one of the problems that we have, of course, you can't have an open-door immigration policy unless you have some form of welfare reform. We believe, as Austrian economists, in the free movement of labor, but it can't work if you have state-run education, state-run health, cradle-to-grave welfareism. You can't run it on that basis when people from Eastern Europe are living on maybe $10 a day. So you can't do that. And nobody's quite had the nerve to talk about welfare, both social welfare and corporate welfare reform. So it's swung around now to being mainly a fear of immigration, which is leading the game. And add that, people are beginning to realize now, after 5 weeks of campaign, that they have lost self-government. The average person didn't really understand that, but they're beginning to understand it now. So it's been a bit of everything, Jeff, really. It's been a little bit of everything.
Well, we appreciate your time on this so much. A very fascinating subject, a fascinating interview. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know everything that's happening with respect to Brexit, good, bad, and ugly, I suggest you follow Godfrey Bloom at Godders Bloom on Twitter, because I'm finding your Twitter feed, Godfrey, to be an excellent source of information on this. We appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend.
Mises Media on YouTube. Go check them out. Subscribe. They have a lot of great interviews and great talking points. And, you know, I was talking about this with another gentleman, and, you know, he goes, are you surprised that it got to this point? I'm like, not really. I've seen that, you know, people will recognize that more centralized government tends to take free choice out of their hands, because the more centralized it gets and the wider grip that centralized power gets, the more it kind of ignores culture. It ignores, history. It ignores pride of a people. For this utopia that they've dreamt up that isn't a reality. What we do find is people will rebel against empires that grow too big. And he brought up, remember when back in 08 election cycle when we were seeing, Britons for Ron Paul and, seeing pictures come from around the world. We support Ron Paul. And really the message and how wide and broad that message rang with people. And, that has probably been brewing. And people are interested in the idea of freedom and liberty. And how can we have a society that's prosperous and not unhinged? And it comes back to, what kind of culture, do you live under? What can we persuade people to a certain way of living? And it really comes down to, do you see suburbs and additions where they have rules, everybody abides by these rules, gated communities, they make a choice, can't really complain if you can't put up a shed because you knew that when you moved in. You can choose to leave, and there's some that we see that where the rules eventually may take a toll where you have a pushback from that community. Going, well, we had this rule about fences and no privacy fences, which I've seen that rule. Well, we kind of decided we don't like to see the neighbors sunbathing. They don't like seeing us sunbathing. We don't like seeing any of our neighbors sunbathing. We want to change that rule. And they push back against those rules and they change it. I see a lot of, additions that start off strict and they eventually allow things like that. Now, give everybody a warning here. We do have some pretty good storms rolling through. I've been turning off non-essential electronics that are plugged into my battery backup here, but it still will not last that long with just the computer and the control board and all that. So if we lose power, I will have to disconnect quite quickly, but I'll be able to warn you. I think that part of what we see as a nationalist movement is also a form of a movement towards individual freedom. And I think that there's a possibility that it can have global implications. And we got some heavy, heavy rain coming down out there. Just in case if we do get disconnected, I want everybody to go to ucy.tv. Of course, there is a support ucy.tv little tab at the top. Click that. You can always donate to UCY. It helps us cover operating costs. And another way you can help with that is if you scroll down towards the bottom, there's an Amazon button. click that Amazon button, takes you to our partner store with Amazon, where you get the same great prices, same great shipping rates from Amazon. And at the same time, you see why it gets that little bit of kickback to help cover operating costs. So we have this platform for me and the other hosts here to get information out to you. So please don't forget to do that. And, you know, why we have these storms rolling through makes me glad that I do prep a little bit, because I do have essential things. If power goes out for days, I have preparations. And one way you can prepare is My Patriot Supply. They have everything from, you know, camping water filtration to even more long-term prepping needs like seed vaults, herbal, vegetable, and, you know, medicinal herbal seed vaults. Go check them out. If you go to antityrannynews.com/mypatriot, that'll take you straight to My Patriot Supply. And at the same time, Anti-Tyranny News gets a little kickback to cover operating costs on our end. So go check it out, and, you know, maybe we can upgrade our battery backup to be able to actually last maybe the whole broadcast. Probably not anytime soon. We have other needs. But it's one of those things that it's going to be up to alternative media to, you know, push for our rights as individuals, because you're not going to see that for mainstream media. They are always out to push a social agenda and a control mechanism on people, and they operate as part of that control mechanism. And, you know, we want people to be able to be the individual, because we know when individuals get to be free and express their talents and their passions and, you know, survive on their own merits, we know that humankind is able to progress and prosper at a amazing rate. So, you know, don't give up on humanity quite yet. But as we look forward at this whole election cycle, it's good to see poll numbers going up for the Libertarian Party. But do we have enough of the nation that is fed up with the control mechanisms that will actually stand up and say we will demand freedom and liberty and our rights and our our constitutional rights and our rights as human beings? That we are not here to live in a country that is a tyranny. We are here to live in a country that protects our freedoms, and to persuade the rest of the world to go that direction. We have a lot of issues, and we're not going to solve them with one president, 2 terms. We can't solve all the problems. We won't ever be able to solve all the problems. There will be bad people. There will be bad things that happen. There will be accidents. There will be bad choices. But that doesn't give other people a right to rule over you, when most of them have done those same things, and then to turn around and criminalize you for it. We will see what happens in this election. Again, you know, go check out the Free State Project. If you're in New Hampshire right now, try to get your way over to Porkfest, Porcupine Freedom Festival. It's one of those things that there are movements going on around the world, and there is a sort of evolution of the mind, and a mutual understanding that we don't have to agree on lifestyles, but we have to agree on the fundamentals of non-coercion and persuasion, using persuasion instead of coercion. And we have the ability to make a statement, not only here in America, but around the world, when you have these chances to take these votes and referendums. And any free person has the natural right to free themselves from a system that is trying to put chains and bind them down. And history has shown that's what happens. But does it always have to happen in a violent way? History has shown us no. But we also know that it's hard to recover from a violent revolution. It's the nonviolent ones, the ones that happen through awareness, education, and the free flow of information. We will see ups and downs. Nothing will be perfect the whole time. Nothing will ever be perfect. You will have, again, crime, bad people, but you should have the right to defend yourself. Your neighbors, your community should have the right to stick up for themselves when that happens. Again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening. If it wasn't for the listeners out there, well, we'd just be talking into blank space. But thank you all again for tuning in. Stay tuned here on ucy.tv. Great broadcast coming up after this. And again, don't forget to go to ucy.tv. You can either donate, click the UCY support tab, or scroll down to the bottom and check out all the great offers at Amazon.com, where we have partnered. And when you click that link at the bottom there, that will help UCY. We will get a kickback and no extra cost to you. Same great cost, same great shipping rates. Check them out. And don't forget, prepping gear. Go to My Patriot Supply. They have some great gear. If you go to antityrannynews.com/MyPatriot, it will take you right there, and that'll help cover operating costs here on our end. And again, thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned here on ucy.tv. And, when you're going out, spread, UCY and other alternative media, definitely to those that maybe are still stuck on mainstream media, because we know that we're not getting the whole truth from them. And we need to spread information that is not getting to the masses that are, into mainstream media. And stay tuned again. Take care.